Every man has a field to tend. How's your field doing? Mine's not looking so good right now. That's what we're going to talk about on this edition of Hashtags from my garden in my front yard. So I decided to come out today and work in my yard. It's gonna be a beautiful day today, although it's Pittsburgh cloudy as normal. But eventually it's gonna be sunny and about 70 degrees today, which is very exciting because then I get to work outside and tend my garden or my field, which is looking pretty sad right now. You know, I've worked with a couple different guys recently who are encountering this in their life. The field that they've been given to tend in their family, their marriage, their kids, even their work and their career has been neglected. A lot like my garden here. Now they're having to come back and do a lot of extra work to bring things back up to snuff. Just like I'm gonna have to do here. I'm gonna dig this whole thing up and just redo everything basically, start from the ground up, because not much is growing out of here and there's so many weeds coming up, it's just a mess. So I literally have to just tear the whole thing up and start over again. A lot of us as men find ourselves in that situation in our lives where the fields that God has given us to tend have gotten overgrown and we've neglected them because of our own sinful, selfish desires, the pleasures that we have indulged in, the ways that we haven't been there for the ones we've loved, or maybe been true to who God has called us to be. Author Stephen Mansfield talks about this in his great book, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men. In Genesis, God gave every man the responsibility to be fruitful and to multiply, to cultivate, to grow, whether it be an actual garden, whether it be a career, whether it be a family, whether it be parenting. We've all been given a field to tend. Unfortunately, what we do as men, we'll look at other fields, other gardens that look nicer than ours, which can often lead us to adultery, can often lead us to the path of least resistance, or what seems to be that. And all the while, our field continues to deteriorate as we continue to neglect it. Eventually, God's gonna call us to account for our fields that we are responsible for. And often, I've seen it over and over again, that it comes to a point where a man is finally brought to his knees, literally like I am right now in this garden, brought to our knees, and we realize how bad the problem is, and ultimately how much we've contributed to it. And so this is gonna take a lot of hard work for me to do right now, but it's gonna be a beautiful day and I'm looking forward to it. A lot of us though, when it comes to our lives, with overgrown fields that we've neglected for so long, it's not so fun. It's not just as simple as getting in and getting our hands dirty like we do in our career or other avenues of our lives where we feel like we have control in some way, because in this stuff we don't. In areas of our lives where God has given us a responsibility of fields to tend, ultimately we have to take it and entrust it into God's hands. We have to go to God to be able to help us to reinvigorate our field. There's work to be done, for sure, but it's God who often does it in our hearts first. God has to rip up that stuff and start over again often, but we have to let him do it. We have to lend ourselves to him to be able to accomplish that in our lives. And as we do, that power will change us from the inside out and enable us to tend our field that he's entrusted to us to tend more responsibly. Philippians 2:13 says, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purposes." Even the desire to want to please God, the desire to want to work on our field and tend it and revitalize it, comes from entrusting ourselves to God. And when we do that, when we begin to trust ourselves to God and we begin to walk in the truth, the light of the reality of who we are and the reality of who God is, he begins to work in us and change our desires. So maybe right now you're stuck in an addiction, in an affair, and you can't even remember the last time you felt any love toward your field, okay? Or any weight of responsibility. whether it be to your marriage or to your kids, because you're so far gone now and you've neglected it to such an extent that you don't even want to think about going back and trying to work on that. See, we have to entrust ourselves to God first, to have Him give us those desires back. Philippians 2:13, again, it says, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to His good purpose." We've got to entrust ourselves to Him to even have the desire to begin to want to start working and tending our fields again. So how do your fields look today? Are they a little bit like mine? Pretty shabby and bad looking? Or are you seeing a lot of growth, a lot of prosperity, a lot of love, a lot of blossoming of relationships and fruitfulness? When we've entrusted our fields to God and allowed Him to work in us to be able to tend our fields the way He's called us to, that's where we end up getting the purpose and the joy and the peace and the hope. Because it's not just about us, because it's about the growth and the fruit produced in a garden that's well tended, in a field that's well tended. And ultimately, it's never us who ends up tending it. It's always God who ends up doing the tending through us. We just have to entrust it to God and allow Him to do His work. And that, for guys we're all control freaks, is one of the hardest things to do. So guys, think about your family, think about your relationships, think about your parenting, your kids, your career, all these different aspects. What do your fields look like? Are they tended, or have they been entrusted to God, and is He working through you to produce, to be fruitful? If not, maybe it's time to trust God. Maybe it's time to look at this and say, I can't do it anymore, and turn it over to God and allow Him to work in your life and to be able to help you, to empower you to tend your garden. But the first step is always to be empowered by the light. We've got to step into the light and be real and honest and vulnerable about the fact that we have an issue. We've got an overgrown, nasty field that needs a lot of work. A lot of us are in denial about that. But once we step into the light and embrace the truth of the reality of our field, the sooner God can get to work in our lives and in the fields of our lives. All right, fellas, until next time, let's live empowered by the light.